Step back into Canada in the 1960s. Eating out wasn't something families did every night or even every week. It was a special occasion, a reward after a long week of work, or a treat on Sundays. Restaurants weren't just places to grab food. They were places where memories were made. Today, grabbing a meal can be as easy as tapping your phone, with fast food chains and delivery apps at every corner. But in the 1960s and 1970s, Canadians had a very different experience. Choices were fewer, menus were simpler, and service often came with a personal touch. So, where did Canadians go when they wanted something special? Which places became part of everyday life, and which ones are still remembered with warmth? In this journey, we'll rediscover the best restaurants of old Canada, the diners, chains, and multicultural gems that shaped a generation. Imagine walking into a Canadian diner in 1963. The first thing you notice is the polished chrome counter gleaming under bright lights. Red leather stools line the bar, each one squeaking as children climb up with excitement. The air smells of brewed coffee, sizzling bacon, and freshly baked pie cooling behind the counter. For many families, this wasn't just a place to eat. It was an outing, a celebration, an escape from routine. Menus were simple but comforting. Tourtière, hot chicken sandwiches dripping with gravy, and fish and chips wrapped in paper were staples. These dishes weren't gourmet, but they were hearty and affordable, making a night out possible for working-class families. A diner meal might cost only a couple of dollars, yet the memory it created was priceless. Children often remember the small details, the clinking of cutlery, the waitress in her uniform with a friendly smile, the hum of chatter filling the room. And then, of course, there was the jukebox. In 1962, for just 5 cents, you could play your favorite song while waiting for your meal. Picture the thrill of hearing Elvis or the Beatles while sipping a chocolate milkshake. That small act transformed dinner into an event, giving children a sense of control and joy that stuck with them for life. Fun fact, many diners had special of the day boards, handwritten in chalk. Families sometimes planned their visits around those deals, especially Friday fish nights or Sunday roast beef plates. It wasn't only about eating, it was about belonging to a rhythm of community life. These diners became more than restaurants. They were social hubs where neighbors met, teenagers gathered after school, and families celebrated milestones. Some diners stayed open late into the night, serving truck drivers, shift workers, and anyone seeking warmth and conversation after a long day. Looking back, family diners and local restaurants of the 1960s and 1970s tell a story beyond food. They reveal a Canada that valued simplicity, connection, and small pleasures. Every jukebox tune, every hot sandwich, every shared slice of pie carried a piece of cultural memory. And it leaves us wondering, how many of today's restaurants will be remembered with the same affection 50 years from now? By the mid-1960s, Canada's dining scene began to change. While diners and local restaurants remained beloved, a new force was emerging, Canadian chains that would eventually become household names. Unlike the flashy American imports, these chains carried a distinctly Canadian flavor, balancing affordability with a sense of community. Harvey's, founded in 1959, revolutionized the way Canadians thought about hamburgers. Instead of receiving a pre-made sandwich, you could walk down the line and tell the staff exactly what you wanted: pickles, onions, lettuce, or extra sauce. In an age when choice was limited, this was a small but exciting innovation. Kids loved pointing to their favorite toppings, while adults appreciated the freshness. Fun fact, Harvey's was among the first fast food spots in Canada to let customers fully customize their meal, a tradition that still defines its brand today. Then came Tim Hortons in 1964. What began as a modest coffee and donut shop in Hamilton quickly grew into something far greater. A steaming cup of coffee paired with a simple donut cost only a few cents, but it offered more than sustenance. It created a gathering place. Workers stopped in before their shifts, students shared donuts after school, and families bonded over weekend treats. By the 1970s, Tim Hortons wasn't just a restaurant, it was an institution woven into the fabric of Canadian daily life. Swiss Chalet added another layer of identity. Opening its first location in 1954, it became famous for its rotisserie chicken, tender and juicy, served with its now iconic chalet sauce. Families didn't just eat there for the food, they came for the atmosphere of comfort, a sense of stepping into a cozy lodge where warmth and tradition met. For many Canadians, Swiss Chalet dinners became synonymous with birthdays, holidays, or Sunday family outings. But change was on the horizon. In 1967, McDonald's opened its first Canadian location in Richmond, British Columbia. Its golden arches and ultra-fast service threatened to overshadow local chains. Many wondered, could Harvey's, Tim Hortons, and Swiss Chalet survive this American giant? Against the odds, they not only survived but thrived. Canadians embraced McDonald's, but they also defended their own. These chains carried flavors, traditions, and a familiarity that couldn't be replaced. The rise of Canadian chains wasn't just about convenience, it was about identity. Each meal represented not just food, but a statement that Canadian tastes, traditions, and communities mattered in a rapidly globalizing world. As Canada moved through the 1960s and 1970s, its cities were transformed by waves of immigration, and nowhere was this more visible than at the dinner table. Long before multiculturalism became official policy in 1971, Canadian neighbourhoods were already rich with new aromas, flavours, and traditions that shaped the country's food culture in unforgettable ways. Italian restaurants were among the first to make their mark. In Toronto and Montreal, small pizzerias opened their doors, often run by families who had recently arrived. In the early 1960s, pizza was still a novelty to many Canadians, but it quickly became a favourite. Imagine a child in 1965 tasting melted mozzarella and tomato sauce baked on a crisp crust for the first time. It felt like magic. Pizzerias also introduced spaghetti and lasagna, dishes that became staples at both restaurants and family tables. Chinese restaurants also flourished, often known as chop suey houses. These spots introduced dishes like fried rice, sweet and sour pork, and egg rolls. They were adapted to local tastes, but still carried the essence of Chinese culinary tradition. Families loved them because they were affordable, filling, and different from the usual fare. Fun fact, many small towns across Canada, even remote ones, had at least one Chinese restaurant by the 1970s, often becoming the only sit-down dining option in the community. By the 1970s, Greek influence grew strong, particularly in urban centres. Diners run by Greek families became staples, serving souvlaki, gyros, and hearty Mediterranean meals. These places often stayed open late, welcoming students, workers, and night owls. They weren't just restaurants, they became gathering spots where cultures blended over shared plates. What made these multicultural restaurants special wasn't only the food, but the sense of discovery. For many Canadians, stepping into a pizzeria, a Chinese chop suey house, or a Greek diner was their first taste of another culture. These meals opened windows to the wider world, all without leaving the neighbourhood. And in doing so, they reshaped what it meant to eat Canadian food. Looking back, the rise of immigrant restaurants in the 1960s and 1970s reveals a Canada in transition, from a country defined by tradition to one enriched by diversity. Each plate told a story of adaptation, resilience, and community. And it leaves us wondering, which of today's immigrant-inspired restaurants will become tomorrow's nostalgic memories. Looking back at Canadian restaurants in the 1960s and 1970s is like flipping through a family photo album. Each page tells a story of flavor, community, and change. From the cozy diners with chrome counters and jukebox tunes to the rise of Canadian chains that became national icons, and finally the immigrant-run eateries that brought new worlds to local streets, every restaurant carried more than food. It carried identity. Family diners and local restaurants showed us the importance of gathering. They were simple, affordable, and full of warmth. A hot chicken sandwich or a slice of pie might not seem like much today, but in 1965 it could mark the highlight of a week. Those meals weren't just about taste, they were about connection. Canadian chains told a different story. Harvey's introduced the thrill of choice, Tim Hortons built a culture of everyday comfort, and Swiss Chalet turned Sunday dinners into family traditions. Against the backdrop of McDonald's expansion in 1967, these chains held their ground, reminding Canadians that their own flavors mattered. They weren't just businesses, they were pieces of national pride. Then came the multicultural gems, Italian pizzerias, Chinese chop suey houses, and Greek diners revealed that Canada was not just adopting new foods, but embracing new identities. Each meal was a doorway into another culture, showing that dining out could be as much about learning as it was about eating. These restaurants proved that food is one of the most powerful ways to bring people together. What makes these memories powerful isn't nostalgia alone, it's the recognition that these restaurants reflected the society of their time, a Canada moving from tradition to innovation, from uniformity to diversity. They show us how food can be both comfort and change, memory and discovery. Today, when fast food is everywhere and delivery is just a tap away, it's worth asking, what will future generations remember about us? Which restaurants of today will be remembered with the same affection 50 years from now? Now, I'd love to hear from you. Do you have memories or stories from your parents and grandparents about dining out in the 1960s or 1970s? Share them in the comments below, because your stories keep history alive. And if you enjoyed this journey, subscribe to Vintage Canada for more nostalgic looks into the past that shaped who we are today.